Loneliness in old age is not the absence of people. It's the absence of someone who understands the wounds that have no name. There comes a moment in life, not marked by calendars or candles, but by silence, when the world slows down and the noise that once filled our days fades into a hush. In that quiet, some find peace, others only emptiness, but the truth remains. The freest old people are not those with perfect health, perfect families, or perfect finances. They are those who dared, even late in life, to break the rules that were never meant to define them. You see, we are born into a world filled with invisible lines drawn by expectations, by tradition, by fear. And somewhere along the way, those lines become cages. They tell us, don't dream after 60, don't start anew after 70, don't speak your truth if your voice trembles, don't love again if you've loved and lost before. These rules, whispered by culture, reinforced by time, are rarely questioned, until they become the very reason we feel like shadows of ourselves. And yet, somewhere out there, there's an old man who picked up a paintbrush at 75 and found colors that reminded him of his youth. A woman who dared to backpack through Europe with her pension money and found freedom in the sound of foreign laughter. A widower who wrote his first poem, not to be published but to finally say what he never said to his wife while she was still alive. They were not rebelling against society. They were returning to themselves. There is a rule that says, act your age. But what does that mean? Does it mean to move slower, to speak less, to smile only when spoken to? If so, then to act your age is to surrender, and the freest old people know that surrender is not wisdom. It's fatigue disguised as obedience. What if instead you danced like the sea was still listening? What if you dressed like your soul still had opinion? What if you laughed too loud, asked too many questions, or dared to be curious like a child? You wouldn't be foolish, you'd be alive. Another rule whispers, don't be a burden. It's a rule born from pride, from a society that measures worth by independence. But this belief eats away at the elderly. It turns simple needs into shame, makes asking for help feel like failure, and pushes people into isolated corners of their own homes, pretending to be okay when they are not. But the freest old people know something others don't. They know that love, when true, is never burdened by care. They know that interdependence is not weakness. It is the deepest form of connection. And they know that asking for a hand to hold does not diminish their dignity. It deepens their humanity. Some are told, don't talk about your past. No one wants to hear old stories. But these stories, these lived moments, these stitched together memories of heartbreak and victory, of childhood and war, of love gained and love lost. They are not distractions. They are legacy. The freest old people understand that their stories are not just theirs. They are gifts, lessons, lighthouses. And every time they speak, they leave breadcrumbs of wisdom for those still wandering in the woods. They don't shrink to fit into modern silence. They expand into laughter, into memory, into song. And then there's the final rule. It's too late. Too late to start. Too late to forgive. Too late to heal. Too late to change. But time is not the tyrant we make it out to be. It's a mirror, and when you dare to look into it honestly, you might find that some of the most important things you'll ever do in life happen after the world has stopped expecting anything of you. You can still write that letter. You can still say those words. You can still make amends, even if the only person left to forgive is yourself. You can still live, not as someone trying to redo the past, but as someone finally ready to embrace the present with open arms. The freest old people are not fearless. They are just done pretending, done apologizing, done shrinking. They don't need permission to be who they are, and they don't need a finish line to feel victorious. So if you're listening to this and there's a part of you still holding on to an old rule, one that tells you what you can't do, what you shouldn't try, what you must not feel, let it go. Let it fall like leaves in late autumn, not because the tree has died, but because it's finally ready for something new to grow. There is time, there is breath, there is you. Break the rules. Live your truth, and let this chapter, the one you're living right now, be the most honest, most beautiful, most unapologetically chapter you've ever written. You are not too old. You are just getting started. You are not too old. You are just getting started. You don't need to be a hero in someone else's story. You simply need to be the author of your own. Even now, even here, even if the ink feels a little dry and the pages a little fragile, there's a quiet revolution in growing old that no one talks about. A revolution that begins not with marching or shouting, but with something far simpler: choosing yourself, choosing to feel, choosing to care, choosing not to fade quietly into someone else's version of what your life should be. They told you, be careful, so often that now, your every step is calculated, your joy measured, your dreams trimmed down to fit inside a life that's been shrinking for years. But what if being careful is exactly what robbed you of your courage? There is a man who used to build boats. His hands were once strong, his back sturdy. Now, arthritis keeps him from holding tools. But his mind is sharper than it's ever been. One day, he stopped watching the water from afar and began writing stories about the sea instead. He couldn't build boats anymore, but he could build worlds. There is freedom in knowing that when one chapter ends, another begins. If only you have the boldness to pick up the pen. Somewhere along the line, aging became synonymous with irrelevance. But that is not the truth. That is a lie sold to you by a culture obsessed with youth. A culture terrified of wrinkles, of slowness, of silence. But let me tell you this. There is wisdom in every line on your face. There is memory in your silence. There is meaning in your pace. The freest old people do not run to keep up. They walk at their own rhythm. And the world adjusts. You are not in a race. Not anymore. In fact, maybe you never were. Maybe now is the time to finally stop running from yourself, from your emotions, your regrets, your unfinished songs. You don't have to pretend you're okay when you're not. You don't have to carry your grief like a suitcase with no handle, heavy and awkward, but never set down. You can cry, loudly, if you must. You can say their name, the one you lost, the one you miss, the one you never got to say goodbye to. Grief, after all, is not a weakness. It is a sign that you have loved deeply, and that, my dear friend, is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be proud of. There is also the rule of silence, the one that says, don't speak too much, don't share your opinions. No one listens to old people anymore. But that's not true. Somewhere, someone is listening, a grandchild, a nurse, a stranger on a park bench, a lonely soul scrolling through a video at 2 a.m., hoping for a voice that sounds like wisdom. Your voice matters, not because it's loud, but because it's honest, not because it's perfect, but because it's lived. You have walked through storms others have only read about. You have survived griefs others could not name. You have found joy in simplicity. You have seen the rise and fall of empires within the world and within your own home. Do not let your voice be the one that dies while you are still breathing. Speak, and not only of the good times. Speak of the mistakes, the regrets, the foolish choices. Speak of the person you used to be and the journey toward the person you are now. There is more beauty in an honest flaw than in 1,000 filtered truths. The freest old people don't seek perfection. They seek meaning. And meaning is not found in applause. It is found in the quiet understanding that your life, messy, complicated, beautiful, has matter. There's a woman in her late 70s who goes to the local cafe every morning with a red scarf and a notebook. She doesn't write for an audience. She writes because her memories deserve a home. And when asked why she wears red every day, she said, because I'm still alive and I refuse to be invisible. Refuse to be invisible. You do not disappear because society forgets you. You disappear when you start believing you should. But you're still here. That means there's still something left. A word, a hug, a laugh, a sunrise you haven't watched yet, a letter you haven't written, a story only you can tell. If you ever feel like you've done nothing extraordinary, remember this: your existence, in all its trials and quiet triumphs, is extraordinary. You survived decades. You witnessed love and war and peace. You saw the world change, sometimes without asking your permission, and still you adapted. The freest old people are not those who had it easy. They are the ones who allowed life to shape them, but never erase them. Yes, your body may slow down, but your spirit, that is untouched. The most powerful act you can do today, at this very moment, is to reject the lie that your life is winding down, to reject the lie that your best days are behind you, to reject the rule that says, stay quiet, stay small, stay out of the way. You have walked too far to be silent now. There's a story you carry. It doesn't belong in a drawer. It doesn't belong in the back of your mind. It belongs out here, in the world, in the air, in someone else's ears, in someone else's heart. So tell it. Sing it if you must, even if your voice trembles, even if your memory skips, even if the words feel clumsy, because there's a young person out there who is drowning in doubt, and your story might be the very lifeline they need. Because there's a part of you that is still waiting to be heard, not by others, but by you. The freest old people are those who finally listen to the voice inside themselves, the one that's been whispering all along, you're still here, there's still time. Time to love again. Time to forgive someone, or yourself. Time to learn something new. Time to be outrageous, brave, soft, radiant, whatever the hell you want to be. Time to remember that you were never meant to just exist quietly. You were meant to shine, not like a star far away, but like a hearth, warm, steady, full of stories, full of grace. So let the world see you. Let the world know you are not done. You are not past. You are not invisible. You are here. You are breaking the rules, and you are finally, gloriously, unapologetically, you are here. You are breaking the rules, and you are finally, gloriously, unapologetically free. But freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the soft decision to stop apologizing for taking up space. It's the stillness of knowing you don't have to prove anything anymore. It's the tender courage to let go of bitterness, of guilt, of the weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. You see, many of us reach old age thinking we are supposed to become gentler versions of ourselves, quieter, more passive, agreeable. But the freest old people, they become more themselves than ever. Not diluted, not edited, but distilled. They stop trying to be what others expect and start honoring what they've always been deep down. And sometimes that means breaking a rule that says be grateful but never want more. Why not want more? Why is wanting more joy, more adventure, more love seen as greedy just because you've passed 70? Gratitude is beautiful. But gratitude is not the same as settling. You can be grateful and still reach. You can love your memories and still hunger for more moments to remember. You are allowed to want new friendships, new passions, new discoveries, even now. Especially now. A man once told me he stopped painting because he thought it was silly to start again at 83. His hands shook. His eyes blurred. But one afternoon, In the garden, he picked up an old brush, dipped it in the trembling light of sunset and made a mark. That mark became a flower. That flower became a sky. That sky became a whole world he'd been holding inside for decades. It was not silly. It was sacred. Do not let embarrassment rob you of your sacred. Let the world call it foolish if it must. You will know it is freedom. And if there's something you've put off, some song you never wrote, some language you always wanted to learn, some dance you always dreamed of trying, ask yourself, who says it's too late? Whose voice is that? If it's not your own, why keep listening? There is another rule. Unspoken but ever present. Don't talk about the hard things. Smile. Be pleasant. Hide your pain. But the freest old people know that healing doesn't come from hiding. It comes from honesty. There are things you haven't told anyone, aren't there? Moments that haunt you, regrets you carry like old photographs, worn at the corners but never thrown away. Maybe there's something you wish you'd said to someone who's gone. Maybe there's a chapter of your life you still haven't made peace with. Here's the truth. You can still say it. You can still heal. Write a letter. Burn it. Keep it. Share it. Cry over it. Laugh at it. Do whatever your heart needs, but don't pretend the past doesn't matter. It matters. Because it shaped you. Because you endured it. Because you survived. The freest old people do not deny their scars. They show them like medals. They know that vulnerability isn't weakness. Vulnerability is strength without armor. And there's something so profoundly powerful about an old person who speaks honestly, not bitterly, not regretfully, but truthfully. Who says this broke me, but I am still here. Who says I've made mistakes, but I learned. Who says I have cried, but I have also laughed. I have feared, but I have also loved. And maybe that is the real revolution. Not to pretend that life hasn't hurt us, but to declare that it hasn't ended us. You are still becoming. That's the secret no one tells you about aging. That even now you are not finished. That there are still lessons to learn. Still parts of yourself to uncover. Still layers you haven't peeled back. Dreams you haven't dusted off. Strengths you haven't discovered because life hasn't yet asked you to show them. And when it does, you'll be surprised. There is an old woman who volunteers at a school not to teach, but just to listen. She sits at recess, in the corner of the playground, and listens to children talk. Sometimes about cartoons, sometimes about their fears. She says it helps her feel alive, but what she doesn't see, what she doesn't know, is how many of those children go home with lighter hearts because someone listened. We often think we have nothing left to give, but presence is a gift. Listening is a gift. Telling the truth is a gift. Sitting quietly next to someone who is hurting, without fixing them, without solving anything. Just being there is a gift. You are a gift. And the freest old people don't just know that they live like it. They live like their life still has weight, like their words still matter, like they can still change the temperature in a room, not with volume, but with wisdom. So if you ever feel like a ghost in your own life, drifting, forgotten, half seen, let me say it clearly. You are not invisible. You are seen. You are needed. You are part of the fabric of this world, not a frayed edge, but a golden thread. The world is louder now, faster. It scrolls past without looking. It chases novelty. But you hold something deeper. You hold memory. You hold stillness. You hold the kind of truth that only comes from having lived. And the freest old people don't chase relevance. They embody meaning. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will listen. But someone will. And sometimes the person who needs to listen most is you. You, telling yourself that it's okay to rest, that it's okay to begin again, that it's okay to let go, that it's okay to feel joy, even if others think you shouldn't, that it's okay to forgive someone who never apologized because you're tired of carrying them in your chest, that it's okay to sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun go down, and know that you are not missing anything, that you are not behind, that you are not waiting for anything to begin, because it already has. Freedom is not something granted to the young and taken from the old. It is something we claim at any age, the moment we stop living by borrowed rules and start living by our own quiet truths. You are not here to please everyone. You are not here to meet expectations that never belong to you. You are here to live in the truest, deepest, most unedited way possible. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You give others permission to do the same. You give others permission to do the same. That's the quiet legacy of the freest old people, not monuments or medals, but the invisible paths they leave behind for others to follow. Paths of honesty, of courage, of kindness that asks for nothing in return. Sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is to sit in the truth of who you are, with nothing to prove and no one left to impress. And perhaps that's what freedom truly is, not the absence of rules, but the presence of self. You're allowed to outgrow the life you built in your younger years. You're allowed to look around and say, this doesn't fit me anymore. The roles you played, mother, father, worker, provider, peacekeeper, they were chapters, not your whole identity. They were part of your story, but not the title of the book. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself they're used to, especially if that version keeps you small. The freest old people understand this. They understand that change is not betrayal. It's expansion. They give themselves permission to evolve, not into someone else, but into someone more. There's a kind of light that only comes into your eyes after 70. It's softer, but not dimmer. It's not the light of youth, wild and untamed. It's the light of knowing, of having weathered the worst, and still waking up with a willingness to see beauty in small things. The warmth of tea in the hands, the way morning sunlight touches old wood floors, the softness of a well-worn shirt that still smells like home. You begin to notice the things that used to rush past. You begin to savor instead of chase, to listen instead of interrupt, to sit without fidgeting, to love without possessing. And in that slowing down, in that sacred stillness, you begin to remember something the world forgot, that life was never about the loudest voice. It was about the truest one. The rule that says fade quietly is the one the freest old people throw out first. They don't want to fade. They want to become vivid. Not in a desperate, clinging way, but in a grounded, peaceful way. They want to be seen, not for who they were, but for who they still are. You are still becoming. Don't let anyone, even your younger self, convince you otherwise. It's okay to want new things. It's okay to no longer enjoy what you once loved. You're not failing. You're shifting. And shifting is sacred. There's a myth that says the soul shrinks with age, that the body withers and the spirit follows. But that's not what I see. I see souls that grow larger as bodies slow down. I see eyes that shine with more compassion than ever. I see laughter that rumbles deeper, love that becomes quieter but somehow more complete. Because when time strips away the noise, the only thing left is essence. And what a beautiful thing it is to meet someone's essence, to see them not as what they've done or what they've achieved, but simply for who they've become. The freest old people stop chasing identity. They return to presence. There is a freedom in not being afraid of silence anymore, in letting a conversation breathe, in watching a bird without reaching for your phone, in simply being, with no need to fill the air with stories or updates or noise. You don't have to fill every moment. You are enough, even when but there's also freedom in connection, in reaching out. Not because you're lonely, but because you want to be close to something true. Many people in old age begin to withdraw, not because they don't need others, but because they've been told their presence is no longer valuable. They stop calling. They stop writing. They stop showing up. Not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion, out of fear of being an afterthought. But the freest old people, they reject that story. They reach out anyway. They write the letter. They make the call. They leave the voicemail with a poem they just remembered. They bake the cake, even if no one shows up. They love, fiercely, without guarantee, without calculation, because they know that love is not a contract. It's an offering. Every time you offer it, even if it is not returned, you grow lighter. You reclaim your power. And it's this kind of loving that breaks the final rule. Protect your heart. Don't get too close. It's safer that way. But safe is not the goal anymore. Not now. Not when you know how short this life truly is. Not when you've already survived the losses you thought you wouldn't survive. Now the goal is real, soft, brave. To live with your whole heart exposed. Not carelessly, but courageous. To speak to someone as if it's the last time, because someday it will be. To touch someone's hand and let them feel your presence through your fingers. To forgive, not because they asked, but because you are tired of being bitter. To say I love you without measuring how it will land. To show up fully, even if your knees hurt, even if your memory slips, even if the world doesn't notice. The freest old people love like there's no tomorrow, not because they're afraid, but because they understand that today is the only promise life makes. And when you begin to live this way, each breath a celebration, each act an offering, something inside you shifts. You stop looking at the clock. You stop measuring yourself against who you used to be. You stop fearing the end, because you know it's not really the end, just a folding of the story back into the source. And until that day comes, you live. You live not as a fading photograph or a footnote in someone else's biography, but as a presence here and now, felt and known. You become the elder who smiles without needing a reason, the grandmother whose lap becomes a sanctuary, the grandfather whose silence says more than sermons, the friend who listens deeply, the neighbor who waves at every sunrise. You become a light, a quiet fire that warms others just by being alive. You don't need accolades. You don't need titles. You don't even need perfect health. You just need to keep showing up, honestly, gently, fully, in every room, in every conversation, in every breath. The freest old people are those who realized one day that they weren't running out of time. They were finally free to use it, however they choose. And that's the invitation I leave with you. To choose, today, to be free. Free from judgment. Free from regret. Free from the cage of other people's expectations. Free from rules that made sense once, but don't anymore. Free to be the person your younger self always hoped you'd become. Free to be the elder your grandchildren will remember, not just for what you did, but for how you made them feel. Because in the end, that's all that matters. Not what you built or what you earned, but how deeply you lived, how gently you touched others, how brightly you burned before the final dusk. How brightly you burned before the final dusk. The truth is, we are not meant to burn out like candles, dimming slowly until nothing remains. We are meant to blaze, to flicker, to flare, to radiate, until the very last breath. And the freest old people, they understand this. They live not to preserve what was, but to express what still is. They don't spend their days mourning the time that's past. They honor it, and then they keep walking forward, because they know that life is not over just because youth has gone. In fact, Life often becomes clearer in its later chapters, when the noise of ambition fades, when the need for approval falls away, when comparison finally surrenders to presence. There's a strange and beautiful clarity that arrives with age, a quiet knowing that what truly matters is not how much you did, but how well you loved, how deeply you listened, how kindly you looked at yourself in the mirror. And that mirror, it may show you lines and spots and soft skin and grey strands, but if you look closer, it will show you something more. It will show you courage. It will show you a face that has weathered storms and still rises with the sun. It will show you a life, imperfect, unfinished, still unfolding. We don't talk enough about becoming in old age, as if becoming stops at some number, as if growth has an expiration date. But look at nature. Trees still bloom in late spring. Flowers open under autumn light. The sky, even as it darkens at dusk, often offers its most breathtaking colors right before night. Why would you be any different? Maybe now is your time to bloom, not for the world, but for you. Not to impress, but to express. Not to be useful, but to be full. Full of grace, full of memory, full of life. Even if your pace is slower, even if your body aches, even if some days feel like fog, you are still here. And that means there is still a path, not behind you, but ahead. It may not be long, but it can still be luminous. It may not be loud, but it can still be true. You are still writing your story, and you don't need anyone's permission to make the final chapters the most beautiful of all. The freest old people give themselves that permission to be bold in their gentleness, to be loud in their silence, to be fully alive in their aging body, not despite it, but through it. There is a tenderness they carry, not softness as weakness, but softness as power. They've seen enough of life to know that the sharpest things are not always the strongest. That sometimes what breaks you also builds you. That love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like tea left warm, waiting. They've learned to listen with their whole face, to laugh without filtering the sound, to touch others with stories instead of judgments. And this, more than anything else, is their revolution. A revolution of realness in a world obsessed with performance. A revolution of being instead of doing. A revolution of meaning instead of metrics. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. You don't have to fit in anymore. You don't have to strive, stretch, or shrink anymore. You just have to be, and let that be enough. There's a kind of peace that arrives when you stop negotiating with life, when you stop asking why it didn't turn out the way you imagined, and start asking how you can live fully in the story that did. Maybe you didn't become the person others thought you'd be. Maybe you didn't keep the marriage, or the house, or the health, or the dream. But maybe you became someone better, someone who knows the taste of survival, the rhythm of heartbreak, the sound of starting over. Maybe the cracks in your story are not the flaw, but the invitation to shine through them, to let your light fall out from the places you once tried to hide. The freest old people, they glow from those cracks. And if you've been hiding yours, trying to appear okay, strong, perfect, maybe now is the time to stop. Maybe now is the time to exhale, to let go of the mask, to stop performing wellness and begin living truth. Even if your truth is messy, even if your truth is tender, even if your truth is still being figured out. There's no rule that says old age must look a certain way, that you must behave a certain way, that you must live out the rest of your years like a polite guest in your own body, waiting for the end. You can dance, even if it's in your kitchen. You can sing, even if no one hears you. You can start a new friendship, even if you've been hurt before. You can say no, even if you've always said yes. You can take up space, even if they told you you're too much. You can rest, even if the world says you haven't earned it. You can live fully, deeply, unapologetically, because your life does not have to be a slow fade. It can be a final firework, one that lights up the sky just before night. The freest old people burn with that kind of light, not because they're trying to prove anything, but because they've stopped trying to hide. They've broken the rules that told them to stay small, to stay silent, to stay out of the way. And in doing so, they've become more themselves than ever before. So, if you're wondering whether you're too late, you're not. If you're wondering whether it's worth it to open your heart again, it is. If you're wondering whether anyone still needs your story, they do. If you're wondering whether the best is behind you, it isn't. Because best is not a moment. It's a way of being. And the best of life, the most honest, most peaceful, most radiant version of life, often arrives when the rest of the world has stopped expecting anything from you, and you finally begin expecting everything from yourself. Freedom begins there, not in doing everything, but in doing the one thing that matters, living as you are, wholly, honestly, lovingly, without apology, without regret, without fear. So let this be the moment you remember. You were never here to fade quietly. You were here to feel, to really feel, every beat, every breath, every ache, every joy. To cry when it hurts, to laugh when it heals, to sit still when you're weary, to stand tall when you're ready. You were not meant to follow every rule written for someone else's comfort. You were meant to listen, not to the noise outside, but to the voice within. And that voice, it's still there, isn't it? Still soft, still steady, still yours. It's been whispering the truth all along, that you are still becoming, that your story is not over, that these years, these sacred silver years, are not a slow ending, but a bold beginning. You don't have to rewrite your whole life. You just have to reclaim it. From the silence you accepted, from the roles you outgrew, from the fears that were never really yours. Start now, not with grand plans, but with one breath of honesty, one phone call you've put off, one letter to your younger self, one moment of real laughter, one step, however small, in the direction of your own becoming. Let go of needing to be understood. Let go of needing to be agreed with. Let go of needing to make sense to anyone but yourself. The freest old people walk through life, not weighed down by time, but lifted by truth. They love more openly. They rest more fully. They forgive more easily. Not because they're saints, but because they're tired of carrying what no longer serves them. They choose peace over pride, kindness over being right, connection over isolation. They know that a soft heart is not a weak one. They know that strength has nothing to do with control and everything to do with surrender. They no longer ask, how much time do I have left? They ask, what will I do with the time I have now? And they answer that question not with perfection, but with presence, with poetry, with small acts of rebellion, with a smile that says, I have lived and I am still living. So if today is an ordinary day, let it be the one where everything quietly changes. Let it be the day you choose to live by your truth, not by your timeline. Let it be the day you stop trying to become younger and start becoming freer. Because freedom isn't in the body, it's in the soul. And your soul, it's radiant, it's resilient, it's ready. So speak your truth. Wear what makes you feel alive. Say what you never said. Hug longer. Laugh louder. Break the rule. Then break another. Until the only thing left standing is your beautiful, honest, untamed, unrepeatable self. Because you, just as you are already enough, already free, already home. And that is the most beautiful thing of all. fade out with stillness. Soft ambient music, a pause for breath. Then the screen gently fades to black with only this: you are not too old. You are finally free.